Now we're going to go into the woolly bugger. Most people think that it's probably as good a fly that's ever been invented. It will literally catch every fish on earth, whether it's trout or saltwater, bass, you name it. There's another fly we're going to title a little later called a Clouser minnow, and Bob Clouser might argue about which is the best fly to have if you only had one fly, but either way I don't think you'd go wrong. But we're going to do this woolly bugger with a little bit different options. Most fly tying classes start out and do the woolly bugger without a bead or a cone. Now beads are really good because it helps the fly sink. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add a bead right now, and I've got one in my left hand. I've got the hook, which happens to be a 5262 TMC. There's a lot of hooks that you can use. They're mainly tied on streamer hooks. Now the shank length right here, it depends on what shank length you pick. The bigger the fly and the shorter the gap, we go by X. Like a 4X is a pretty long shank fly. In fact, let me show you what a 4X would look like. Here's a 4X. Look how much difference in length compared to what we have. The length of the shank is the X. So this is a pretty good one to start off with. Now, before we put it in the vise, we're going to do something. We're going to add a bead. Now, you have a brass bead. I'm going to show you what a black bead looks like. Now, before we put this in, we're going to look for the smaller size here. There's a small hole and a large hole. We want the smaller hole. These beads are designed to be beveled so they go up against your eye, just like that. Now, color beads. There's all different shades of beads you can use, from copper, silver, tungsten. The more you learn about fly tying, in fact, in Scott Sanchez's material section of this DVD, he'll talk to you about the different types of beads. Now, we're going to start off with this black one to show you a little variety. We're going to put it in our vise. Make sure it's seated very nicely. When you get into these bigger hooks, you're going to have to adjust your vise. Thread on a woolly bugger, most of the time you can use literally about any thread. I usually use about a 6/0 or an 8/0 so I can make a lot of wraps to make it very durable. I'm going to use the same thread I used on the Griffith's net. And we're going to start out at the middle part of the shank and go to the back. Now, one of the first things you might want to do is add some lead. Now, the lead I like to do with my lead is put it on a bobbin. And you can buy an inexpensive bobbin to add the lead. And I'm going to wrap it by just holding on to the lead and moving forward. Look what I'm doing right here. I'm just going to take it, wrap it forward. Now, you want to make sure that this is tight, and so I'm going to kind of take my fingernails and push it forward. Now, where should that lead start? Well, it should start right up from the barb, right there. Now, what I'm going to do with my scissors is pull down on the lead and use my scissors as kind of a lance rather than cut the lead. Now, a lot of folks will use nail clippers to clip the lead and wire so it doesn't ruin your scissors. Now I'm going to wrap again straight forward towards the eye of the hook. Now there's different sizes of lead. The heavier the fly you want to make it, you may want to put on a 25 thousandths lead. This happens to be a 20 thousandths, which is a good one to start out with. That just means the size of the lead. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave a little maneuvering room here. So I'm going to kind of go up just not quite all the way to the eye. Whoops. That's another reason why you want to make sure you have your vise adjusted. So what I'm going to go back and do here is tighten my vise up a little bit. Now this is going to happen to you, and it's not anything wrong with the vise, it just needs to be tightened up. I'm going to try to make some of the mistakes that you might make to help you out in how to correct them. Okay, that's in there pretty good. Now I'm going to again use my scissors as a lance and trim it. Now we're going to take our thumbnail and push it down, just like this. Now you notice how that bead is kind of going back, and if that irritates you, which sometimes does to me, what I can do is take another bit of thread and I can actually wrap thread right here and build up some thread, what we call a thread base. I'm going to trim it. Now notice how I was wrapping over the thread to get started, and I'm going to do a simple half hitch. I'm going to lay my finger on the thread. I'm going to wrap the thread over. I'm going to point it right at the eye and let it slip off. And then, well, make sure it gets on the other side of the bead. There we go. At that point, we can then push the bead on, and that'll hold it in there. I didn't wrap a heavy amount of thread, but that gets you the idea of how to make it stay in there a little bit better. Okay, now what we're going to do, we're going to wrap through the lead with our thread. And we'll go right up to here. And again, we can wrap in front of that bead and behind the bead, and to make sure that it's in there nice and tight. And make sure that lead still isn't quite down. I want to make sure that that's down. There we go. Now we're going to wrap back. Now if you want, you can add, to make some more durability to your fly, just brush on a little cement at this point. And I like the cement that had the little brushes already. If it hits the bead, don't worry about it. By the way, there's other things that you can use besides beads. This happens to be a cone, and a lot of woolly buggers have different cones. This is a black cone, and again, the cones come in different sizes. Here's a brass cone, and a variety of different materials that you can use on that. Now the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take some Marabou. Now, for those of you who like to sneeze a lot, this sometimes gets me sneezing, that and rabbit. But Marabou comes from, originally from a stork. It now comes from turkeys. It's a breast feather, and we dye it. Obviously, I haven't seen too many black turkeys running around, except maybe on New Year's. Now, you want to look for Marabou when you buy it that's nice and fluffy, that has